Welcome everybody to this is May, right? This is the May edition of our MSP Growth Kit webinar with Nate, Austin, and Steve Wright, driving behaviors towards goal. Part one. We're talking hunters today, right, gentlemen? We're gonna talk, well, not just today.
Account managers.
Account managers. Well, so right, account managers. So let's start there. What we're distinguishing between sort of inside sales, outside sales, hunters, farmers, right? Are we all on the same page that like this, that you could say farmer, you could say account manager, you could say inside sales. These are
customer
all
service rep sometimes, or even used for that.
rep.
Yep.
Yeah. Before, let's just kind of start right there. Some people would get into the minutia of like, well, which one of those are you actually talking about? Because inside sales might be somebody who's doing quoting, but not necessarily customer like facing. We're kind of lumping together all of those concepts into account management. Is that a fair assumption for you guys for our conversation today?
Yeah, Brad, the only other thing that I would say that there's a lot of what we'd call hybrid reps out there too, right? Especially if you're like an owner led, you might be doing both hunting and farming. And so I think the definition you said is yes, but there's another variable that you might have multiple functions on the same seat or the same person.
Sure.
But yes, I agree. Account management is the right summary.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're going to start there. And what we're talking about is how do you drive the right behaviors to help accomplish the goals that you have. And Steve, as we were kind of planning for the call, and I'll throw a little shot at Nate here. As you and I were planning for the call, as Nate was late for our prep work, you were selling though, Nate, right? Like you were doing,
I was running an event. I was teaching Copilot is what I was doing. We were teaching Copilot.
Right. As we were talking about this, like one of the challenges we have every month when we do this is, gosh, we have so much stuff in the growth kit. There are all kinds of account management details and templates and forms and behaviors and checklists out in the growth kit. If you go to, we'll put this up at the end, but if you go to hub.connectwise.com/growth kit, you can download all of that stuff. And we can't talk about all of it. So we just want to talk kind of conceptually some of the important things, right, to strive for as we do this. So, I mean, let's just start with goals and key behaviors. Steve, I'm coming to you first. When you think of an account manager, what are the key behaviors that come to mind that you're like trying to drive out of them?
Well, let's level set to suggest that where we're talking about this point is you've got a job description. It's in the toolkit.
Yep,
You've done your onboarding. This isn't their first, 30 days or anything. So you've done some basic training. So we're kind of past that point. And if you need any of that information, it is in that toolkit that Brad talked about. So please go out and do that. So we're not starting from that point. We're starting from, now they're should be in the role doing. So what should they kind of be doing? And so some of the things that we definitely want to do is, especially if they're new to these accounts, is hopefully there's a warm handoff somewhere, right? Like somebody who's managing the account says, hey, here's your new account rep. And I think as business owners or in the business, we have other companies doing that to us all the time. So that should be doing it. However, that doesn't always happen. And so the first part of it to me would be making sure that the customer that you're trying to make sure is being account managed is just knows who you are. And that first call isn't, hey, you need to buy stuff, or, hey, this thing's out of date and I need more money, or whatever it is. So it should be a value add conversation to go, look, I'm your resource here at Next Tech or, MyTech or even ConnectWise for that point. And, I can be your source for if you need anything, if you just need to order supplies, whatever it is that you need to do, come to me first. I'm readily here. I sit at a desk. I got a phone number. You got my phone number. You got my email address. And I strive to respond to you within X amount of hours or whatever it is. And so that you have a bit of a warm introduction. So that'd be my first place to start. But then hopefully during that point in time is, if you have quarterly business reviews or QBRs, sometimes as they're evolved, or annual reviews or whatever you choose to do as a company, you might set that up to say, it looks like your review is due on, will be around this date. Can we go ahead and get that scheduled for you? Just to remind you, here's what our business reviews are. We're going to go, the products and services that you get from us. Make sure we're delivering the services that you expect. Look for budgeting for next year, whatever it is, and kind of have that nice kind of interactions. But part of what I've seen, and I'll be curious when Nate's seen this, people come in a little hot. And like, hey, and by the way, I need you to sign off on this $10,000 order. And, you need to buy this thing. And have you heard about our new stuff? This, and this thing that you probably ought to be buying. Meanwhile, Nate's famous for saying, is the relationship worth the amount you're asking for? Well, there is no relationship because you just started. So bringing value to the relationship. And then my final statement will be here before I turn it over to Nate is, do you have some drip stuff from your company that adds value? Like Nate, he was saying, they were doing some 365 training and, talking about a little bit of AI stuff. And like, do you have that stuff to go, hey, have you heard about Copilot? It's one of the latest things that are happening in 365. Maybe you haven't heard about it. Here's our information on what Copilot could do for you as a customer. I'm not asking for a buy, right? I'm just, here's something you should know that's advancing in technology. Nate?
Yeah, and I think, if you pull back to what's the outcome that I think we are mutually seeking between our client and ourselves. And this role is a facilitator of that. And the goal is, ultimately our clients want uptime. They want their stuff to work. So, that is the fundamental job from my perspective of making sure that the account manager's job is to make sure that the client doesn't get equipment that's too old, that's fit for the purpose that they need, right? And that is life cycle managed appropriately. Now that's some boring stuff sometimes, candidly, because I just want it to work. I don't want to spend time and hours having conversations about it. But sometimes that means we need to sell you stuff, and that means we need to put a budget together, and that means we need to have a plan to make sure it aligns with where your business is going. So I think, so the reverse engineering of the goals and the behaviors is to understand what's our outcome. Ultimately, the account manager's job is to make sure that our client's environment is as appropriately lifecycle managed or fit to their purpose, so that it makes it easier, so they have a better experience, and it makes it easier for our support team to help them. In the end, that's it. And so, but what that means though is that we still have to sell product, we still have to implement the product, we still have to meet their business goals, not our business goals. And so I think that's the challenge. And I think where sometimes our account managers they get a little, and this is where you have to be careful about how you define your goals and how you define the behavior expectations around your goals, is that, and we still have this happen today, we're not perfect at this by any means, where account managers will have quotes out there with clients, and they're at the stage where they're quoted, and for us that means that we should expect the client to sign off in the next 30 to 60 days. But yet the client's this is the thing we talked about, but I'm not even ready for this yet. And that's where the business conversation needs to happen. The account manager, if they're doing their job, has a business conversation and aligns our sales process that we have to go through to make sure we're making the right recommendations for the right equipment, the right fit at the right price, to get to the client when they're ready for it. Because if we get it ahead of when they're ready for it, A, it feels like we're selling something that they don't need. And B, we're probably gonna have to redo the quote anyway, because the time has changed and things have changed, we have to do over. So I think those are some of the things that at a high level, just trying to understand, this isn't about just selling stuff to clients. In fact, I was at a training session yesterday with Nerdio on Azure and 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. And one of the instructor was somebody had asked in a class, well, what should I sell them AVD when they don't really need AVD? No, you're not selling them anything. You're solving their problem. So it's really making sure right? Well, exactly. And that's exactly what it does. It breaks trust, to Steve's comment. Correct. So anyway, that's hopefully a high level understanding of what our mutual outcome that we believe that we as a company and our clients are looking for, and our account manager is a facilitator of that.
So if I was going to add what Nate really said is it's about building relationship and trust, right? And Brad, your original question was what are the metrics? I think, building relationship and trust is a tough metric to check, but I think you kind of it when you see it, right? But the other one that I'm going to add that's really passionate for me is speed. I'm addicted to this new book. Well, it's not that new anymore, by Jay Bauer. It's the consumer patience study, and he has all this data around how fast you as a company respond and the impact of your business. And let me just give you a couple quotes here. 64% of people say that speed is as important as price. 52% of customers have hired a service provider or made a purchasing decision because that company was first to respond. 27% customers say they were likely to spend more money with the company that responds first. Like, so that to me is a key metric that we put very key metrics. Like, I expect responses back to customers same day, same hour, ideally. If it's like an email, it depends on the channel. No more than 24 hours, but realistically, we need to be measuring this in hours because it's the impact of the relationship, to Nate's point, but also to the business. So, sorry.
Well, and Steve, is that applies definitely in account management, like you said, but it also applies in hunting. We're not talking about hunting today, but like that is very applicable, especially when you have a new prospect reaching out to you. But it is absolutely applicable to account management too. So time kills deals is the short version of that.
Time kills deals, and I don't know, Nate. Like I've said this 1,000 times. It was on one of our previous nuggets that we threw out there, right? But if you learn anything, speed, right? Like you don't. And let's be clear. Don't give wrong answers. Don't rush the deal. Don't put configure. What I'm saying is, a customer reach out and says, "Hey, I'm looking to do this thing," and you respond and go, "Great. Let's get to the next step," and you schedule it. Like that's responding. What I think you see more than not is people don't know like when they can schedule it, so therefore they don't respond until they know they have it on schedule. Meanwhile, the customer goes,
"What's going on?"
Not even getting a response.
Yeah. How much of this, going back to Nate, some of what you talked about, how much of this do you have a defined process or roadmap that would be, like for an account manager, this is how we look at our clients, like security and infrastructure and and endpoints, like those sorts of things. Do you have that framework that they work, or are they just sort of left to their own desires on what to talk about and when and how to build a roadmap with a partner?
So, I mean, yes, we have those defined. We actually have some that publish on our website just to like as a high level kind of guide that we share with our clients so they know how we're going to make recommendations. It's not a secret, but ultimately, we want our account managers. One of the things we call our X factor is like we want our account managers and everyone on our team really to have both business and technical acumen. Now on the account manager side, they hopefully have more business they usually have more business acumen than technical acumen, but the technical acumen gap is filled by solution engineering. So like those are the things that like I don't expect our account managers to have a deep knowledge of all that stuff and know all the idiosyncrasies and nuances of security, but I do expect them to involve the solution engineer to fill that gap. But as an account manager gets more repetitions under their belt, more years of experience under their belt, they are able to understand that better as they just experience it a lot more, and they can run faster and they're more autonomous. But they still team sell with solution engineering. I don't know if that's where you're going, Brad. But that's
a little bit. But if I kind of poke into one of those things, this is about getting the right behaviors, right, to drive your goals. And I've seen it. And again, we have some fun with this when we present that. I come from the technical side, right, where the salespeople like just from the technical side, it's like just don't talk any technical functionality at all because you're wrong way more often than you're right. And I'm thinking it's a pattern that I see where an account manager will get comfortable hearing what the technician says, and from the technical side, you're like, yeah, but there's some nuances that when you start talking, you're not quite right. Like, how do you behave? How do you police? And this is the technical person kind of wanting to know how you do this. How do you police the account manager from like stepping on or overstepping their bounds when it comes to how far should they take the conversation before the right people get involved?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a little it is tricky because sometimes one of the key things when I'm onboarding someone, I know we're not talking about onboarding someone. When I'm onboarding someone, one of the litmus tests that I have is if they're not asking any questions, that scares the crap out of me. Right? Like, because that means they're not aware of their own limitations, and they're not asking questions because they're aware of their own limitations.
Yeah.
If someone is asking questions now, as long as they're not like asking the same question over and over and over and over again,
right,
that actually is a good sign for me that they have that kind of awareness in order to make that judgment call. But that is something where people definitely get ahead of their skis sometimes. But one of the things that I coach my team, and I don't have to talk about this very often, but that I'm like, look, we have a phase in our sales process. Speaking of having a process mapped out, it's all mapped out. One of our phases is solution and budget. It is not a requirement that you engage solution engineering to talk at a high level of what the solution is and a high level what the budget is. It's not a requirement.
Yeah.
However, if the client says yes to that solution and budget, and then you go to solution engineering to put the scope together, because our account managers cannot put scopes together, and the budget, the dollars come higher than what you said, guess who has to have the hard conversation?
Yeah, right.
You as the account manager, because you did not team sell, you did not give the right information. So there's some natural kind of intention that's very intentional in our sales process to build that in. But the first part is we don't even let them walk solo until we feel like they're comfortable with that, but it doesn't mean they don't occasionally make mistakes.
Well, I feel like it's necessary to flip Brad's question on the other side is when you get the technician in there that's talking sales.
Yes.
Like you've definitely applied this to one side, not the other. And, one of the things that we do that I feel like is right is I think it's above $5,000 a month. Don't hold me to that. But the salesperson goes out with the supervisor supervising the technical team that's in charge of that account. So that, if there's technical issues, service delivery issues, ticket issues, whatever it is, they can be there to answer. But a lot of times we discuss having a conversation in the car, hopefully together on the ride up there, that goes, look, I will let you know when to talk and when not to, because some of the times the technical team members tend to get really in the weeds with a business owner that has like no clue what they're talking about. And by the time they realize like they've lost the customer. So I expect the salesperson in this case, or the account manager, to be in charge of the conversation. To your point, Brad, they're not delivering, stuff that they're not knowledgeable on. But then when to engage and when not to engage their technical resource and keep it controlled, because sometimes you can get, like they'll start throwing prices out on the table, or, you're like, whoa, we're not even like having that conversation. So, Brad, I had to take my shot there to say, hey, this is not a one-way street, man.
Yeah,
completely agree, Steve, and that's exactly what I was thinking when Brad was asking that question. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Well, it's that is by far the exception rather than the rule of your average technical person.
Is it
really? Okay.
Back and forth all day.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll just assume that's a fact for right now.
Yeah. Right.
By the way, sometimes the owner is the person that needs to be shut down, right? Like, hold on, like you need to slow it down. Like, you're getting ahead of yourself because the owner is trying sometimes just bypass steps in the process. And the salesperson's like, wait, we're not there yet. So just slow down. I'm trying to make sure we have this relationship built, the right value created.
So with this in mind, it seems to me like if you can successfully train up an account manager in the way you want them to behave, they'll hone the right instincts, and like they can be a solid contributor for like almost forever because they get it, right? Like they get that tension that we're just talking about. They get the tension between when is it a technical conversation, when is it a sales conversation? Like when does the client want to move forward, and when are we just kind of talking about a future state that we're agreeing to, but we'll come back and talk about like exactly when are we going to do it. Like they learn those things. Has that been your experience, that if you get a good account manager, like they're reliable. They're a reliable appliance that as long as you keep them plugged in, they're going to produce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely.
And one of the things that made me think of is that a good account manager not only is just responsive to Steve's comment earlier, but they are able to navigate complex situations and oftentimes save a client from leaving 6 months to a year from now. right? Like something that happens today, if it's not handled appropriately and we're not contribute, like we talk about contributing, you've got buckets of like trust, right? You got to have this bucket of trust filled to build your bank of trust, because you are going to make a mistake, whether it's you, the account manager, or your organization. There just absolutely will be something that goes wrong, and you want to have this trust bucket built up, because when that happens, that it draws down. And you draw on that, right? And so that's what helps save and retain clients, is not just doing a great job, but eventually something's going to go wrong, because it just is. It's any relationship, something's going to happen. And so I think a good account manager plugged in not only does all the life cycle management and all those things, but they build this trust and rapport and the confidence that, look, I've got you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure that we navigate this. I'm going to help you navigate the ins and outs and nuances of our organization to make sure that you achieve your objectives. And a good account manager sees that and sees those opportunities and effectively navigates through it. Advocating for the company the whole time, not saying I'm your person. So if they leave, that like, oh my gosh, my one person that made sure our stuff got done. That's not what I mean. Like I'm your liaison, I'm your relationship person, but I'm going to help you through this whole process. So that's what that made me think of, Brad, as far as like a good account manager and what can really have an impact on your business.
And I want to add 2 metrics that we use relevant to that. We do measure churn. So customer losses, we are looking, I'll be honest, the target's 4%, but we average less than 2%. There's, if you're newer and you're getting some of the lower accounts, let's just go with that churn can be higher. Or if you have to make major changes in accounts, rate changes, things like that, it can cause churn. And then the second thing is we're looking for 10% growth per year in accounts managed. And again, that could be, even inside project work that just needs to be done, just to maintain the client, keep them on current products, those kind of things. And we typically see that, exceeded. So those are 2 metrics that we do measure, and we measure on their annual reviews and say, like, those are part of the like minimum expectations.
Yeah. How do you guys handle like tiering your customers? And does an account manager cross tiers, or do you assign an account manager to a tier and they stay in that tier?
So for us, we only have one program that we offer, and so we don't really tier the engagement, because every client on that program gets the same thing. Where we do draw lines is we have a concept of an account manager and a senior account manager. Account managers cannot engage clients that have their own internal IT staff without bringing someone along with them. Like they're not authorized to engage those companies, those larger entities, autonomously until they're a senior account manager. And one of our measurements of a senior account manager is they can learn to navigate the more complex technology, more complex relationships. You're dealing with a technical buyer and a financial buyer and probably other stakeholders. Like they haven't mastered that stuff yet, so they can't go solo. So that's how we tier it. Is that it's almost like a fully managed versus co-managed. Unless you're a senior, you can't engage co-managed clients autonomously.
How do you, and Steve, I'll come back to you, ask you to do it, but Nate, what about like, so this process of like, so do your account managers do your QBRs? Am I looking at that right?
Yeah,
like they go and do them?
Yep.
So do you do the same QBR on the same rhythm for every customer, no matter what, like the 10 user and the company with their own internal IT staff, you have the same sort of process?
If they're on our fully managed program, yes. The only thing I would say is that it's important to understand is that, like, you might have, and this came up in Dallas a couple weeks ago, you might have a large account that has a lot of operational stuff going on, and so you might have weekly or monthly or maybe even a couple times, depending on what's happening, the rate of change. Maybe they're in the midst of a lot of projects. You might be having like weekly cadence calls or weekly kind of operational check-ins. That's different than what a QBR is for. QBR is for, just like you do, and I asked the question in the room when this came up, is like, how many of you have weekly one-on-ones with your team? And they're like, yes. How many of you have quarterly reviews with your team? They're different. And like people say, why do you do them different? What's the difference? Well, the difference is that you might have day-to-day or weekly, monthly operational cadence calls, but the QBR is intended to like pause, lift your head up a little bit to see where you're going and are you on track, right? And make sure you reset that, and then you get your head back down again and go. So the typically what we see is different is depending on the size of the account. The bigger the account, the more likely is there's more rate of change, which means you might have more frequent operational cadence calls, but it doesn't change the rhythm of the quarterly review.
Right. Steve, how do you guys do that?
Yeah, this is where Nate and I different. First of all, we're hybrid sales reps, meaning we don't have the difference between account management and hunters. Part of that is understanding our geography, that we do it by physical territory, just because large chunks of miles, hundreds of miles, and it's a real struggle to send multiple reps into kind of the same physical territory. So we typically hire reps for a particular footprint, and that's there, so they own it. So that's one thing that we differentiate. We've kind of identified that there may not be good or bad; it's just different. Because then the challenge when we get into hunters, that's where the challenge really becomes on my end. Is it's a lot harder to hold the accountability to that new account amount, just because Nate's got a head count that he can hold accountable, where I have to have it's just a portion of a job duty. We do annual business reviews. We do not do quarterly business reviews unless a customer specifically requests it, and then we do them based on dollar amounts. And I think it's north of $5,000 last I remember, that to even qualify for a business review, you have to spend that much with us. Not to say that we won't schedule and have those, but it's more part of just regular account management than it is. Yeah. And then, of course, the other part of this is, again, speaking to the mileage, a rep will schedule if they've got to drive 200 miles this direction, they're going to go look, who can I hit on my way there and on the way back? And that's kind of how you get scheduled, more than, the QBR stuff. So,
yeah. I'm going to go a little bit almost like current events, because I've been going down this rabbit hole a little bit lately of, there's two waves. One's hitting right now and one's coming, that, again, back when I was running MSP, these are the kind of things you got to start educating your customers on. One right now is AI, right? And everybody's wondering about AI, but then the reality is, I think before AI fully blooms inside of business, there's going to be the AI enabled hardware piece that comes, like, as I talked to Lenovo, and you even saw Microsoft release this week, right? Like these new laptops that have AI capabilities built into the hardware, and they're already talking about functionality that you're going to have personal AI in your machines, that's going to be part of the answer, which means sometime in the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be a hardware refresh forced by AI, right? Like, and it's not just, well, what if we don't want it? It's like the hardware vendors are going there. You're not going to have a choice. Like,
so Brad, just because I've started seeing that and I haven't done the research, but what the hell is it? Like, just because it says it's AI enabled, what does that mean? Like, well, do you know? Can you tell me? Fill me in. Like, help me out.
I've gone enough to know this. I mean, like, everybody talks about the genius of NVIDIA, and again, I don't pretend to know everything that like I should about this, but I think a lot of NVIDIA's genius was right product at the right place at the right time.
Completely agree.
They built GPUs, right? And so Intel and everybody else was like, those are cute little things, but the real thing is in the chipsets and the processors. And NVIDIA just happened to be like, well, if we put processing power on the GPU, look at all of this kind of extra horsepower, and that horsepower turned into what actually, like, those mathematical computations that it was designed to take on are exactly what AI needs, and so they
crypto mining, by the way.
Yeah, right.
So two technologies right now that are happening. That's
right.
So right place, right time.
So the AI enabled hardware is pulling a lot of that kind of GPU type computation and putting it like in a different spot, kind of like baking it into the architecture different.
I mean, so is it going to drive business? I guess that's ultimately the question. Like, that's kind of what I was thinking it was. But that feels like a marketing ploy to me. Like,
right. And I love this kind of talk. Right. I love this kind of talk, and we got about a minute left, and I want to get to, because on the heels of AI, and this is where, to me, AI is already sort of old news. It's going to be freaky. It's going to change things, but coming on the heels of AI, and there's about 3,000 they expect to be sold this year, but by early what year is it now? 2024.
24,
2030, right? Which is like 5 years from now, right? Like 5.5 years. Computers are going to turn quantum, like they're not there, which is a whole different state of how computers work, and it curve jumps exponentially processing power. So the next 3 to 5 years are going to be AI, and then it's going to be followed by like rocket fuel injected into the whole thing, and there's going to be a whole nother wave of things that happen. And like that's a really long, like that's where my mind goes. But what role do your account managers play, to reel it back in, to like setting just visionary expectations and like, look, be ready, because in the next few years with AI, as we talk about AI and Copilot, and like for this really to work, you're going to start finding that some of the things you're going to be looking for are going to require some hardware refreshes. Like, do you expect your account managers to go have those conversations?
Short answer is yes. However, they aren't the originators of the vision, right? Like they're not the ones. Like this is where I feel like to one of the things Steve mentioned earlier is that this is where you as an organization need to have some sort of direction that you're providing to them, right? And some of that could be in a marketing blog. It could be in updates to your clients as far as what's coming. Like, and this is not that different than like Microsoft end of lifing Windows 10 in October of next year, 2025.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's really not that different. I mean, for those who've been in the industry a while, we've gone from XP, MU, like all these 7 to 10 to 10 to 11. Like it's the same thing happens, right? So so it's not that different. But I do think that I mean, AI will be different just because of the nature of what it is. But like I think it's just we as leaders of the organization need to provide. We do this in a couple of ways through marketing communications and content and product development, but we also do it in like a quarterly basis of building an agenda and talking about the things that are happening this next quarter. Like Copilot right now is it just got released in January. We just put out some products that we can help sell and consult and teach and train people on. That's launched this quarter. Well, guess what? That's part of our conversation with our clients. So like we have to organizationally put something together, but then we use our account managers as the disseminators, the cascaders of that information. And then when a client might raise their hand, that's when you bring in the expert. That's when you bring in whomever can help complement that gap, because I don't expect them to be experts in everything.
Yeah. All right. Okay, we're out of time. We're over. I can feel Stephanie saying, "Hey, you're over time." So Stephanie, thanks for the grace. We are okay. Again, hub.connectwise.com/growth kit. All kinds of material out there. Go take advantage of that. All kinds of videos. In fact, I think we've added some videos. Nate, we were just in Dallas doing it again, and I think that might be out there now, posted as well. So a lot of resources for you. Steven, you and I are going over to Dublin in a couple of months, and we're going to be delivering it over there. We're going to be back next month. I think maybe the 28th. I'm not sure exactly, but you can find out someplace to do part 2 of account management. We'll talk more about how to use incentive and pay and some of the management KPIs to drive some of these behaviors that we're talking about and keep them in line. And then we'll follow it up with some hunter conversations the next couple of months. So gentlemen, anything that you're like, there was one more thing I really wanted to get out there, or are we good to go?
Brad, you got to do your signature.
I do. Yeah. Like, don't forget, we do these all the time. Smash the subscribe button. Smash it. It's right. It's somewhere.
It's here.
Right there. It might be right there. Smash the subscribe button, and you will be alerted when we have a new one of these videos.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd say that came out since our last video, or right around the last video, is like we have a new LinkedIn community. It's MSP growth community. That's out there online. That's a place where not only YouTube is a great place to post videos and nuggets and things like that, but the LinkedIn group is a great place to then collaborate and share and offer ideas and questions. So just join that or follow that. We'd love to have you there to ask questions, because that's where we also hopefully want to be able to, once we run out of content, which I don't know if we're going to, but if we run out of content, we'd love to be able to use that to ask questions or to incorporate into future videos. So please join that LinkedIn community as well.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Great talking to you as always. And we will talk to you again next month.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.